now for the roundtable.
Yeah, thank you. Well, firstly, I'd like to thank all of the speakers today. They've done an excellent job. I have a long list of notes that I've been taking because there's been a lot of issues that have been raised, and we've got plenty of material for the discussion section, and actually plenty of time as well left over. So that's great. It's been a wide-ranging session so far, and it's really encouraging to see, we were talking about this earlier, that we have a mixture of policymakers and policy influencers, and also scientists here. And that's actually, I think that's something we've already been examining. How do we generate those interaction structures? How do we maintain this, or start this dialogue, or maintain these conversations? And I guess meetings like this are now part of I'm not so experienced. I've not seen so many that I've had access to before, but they're certainly valuable. I'm certainly valuing them now. So this is something that's starting to come up more and more, and the importance of these engagements. Okay, well, so we have a few questions that have come through on the chat. We also have a few questions that we thought about beforehand, and as I say, I have some notes here towards the individual speakers. If anybody would like to, any of the audience would like to make a point, that's fine. Could you please raise your hands? We'll use a hand-raising protocol so that we can actually give people a little time to make their point. And also, you can obviously use the chat function. And if you don't want to open your microphone, you can write your question down if you have one for one of the members of the panel, and that would be great. So we have the panel is composed of the 4 speakers. No, sorry, 5, because we have Andrés as well. Sorry, so we have 5 speakers, and we also have a new participant for the meeting, for the panelist section. It's Vladimir Ghukasayan. Is that correct, or have I said it properly? Please correct me if not. I'm not.
That's close enough.
That's close enough. Okay, that's a very, very polite way of putting it. Thank you. So Vladimir is a science program manager for imaging at the Chan-Zuckerberg Initiative. And if you aren't aware, the Chan-Zuckerberg Initiative have, in the last few years, become extremely important supporters of the bioimaging community around the globe. And they have, I will put some information in the chat in a minute. They currently have a grant call that's open to support global bioimaging, particularly directed at, well, among other regions in Latin America. So it's an extremely important initiative that we need to examine as a community now. Prior to moving to Chan-Zuckerberg Initiative, he worked at Carl Zeiss Microscopy as a product and application sales specialist in Boston, and served as a director of the microscopy imaging core at the University of North Carolina, and built microscopes at the National Yang Ming University in Taiwan as a postdoctoral fellow. So I'm going to embarrass myself further by saying ni hao to Vladimir. Welcome to the discussion. And yeah, so we're going to kick off the discussion with one of the we're going to talk about because some of the more specific questions are actually, we have some more general questions that we're going to use for the satellite meeting, for the discussion. And so first we have some suggested topics. I'm going to put them onto the screen. Okay, so I can just share them with everybody now. Let's start here. Okay. So let me put that in present mode. Get rid of the chat box. Okay, so my computer's being a bit slow. Maybe I shouldn't have done this. So firstly, this is more of an issue around, again, this connection between the different areas. So as an introduction, the investment costs in research infrastructure are high, and the return on investment is usually realized in the long rather than short term. And as such, they require extended support and commitment from their stakeholders. And there we're talking about the whole community around those infrastructures, which is the users, the custodians, and the funders. Resources are always limited. That's just the universal truth. prioritization of investments in that case is necessary. So I would like to ask the panel for their opinions on how do the political stakeholders choose their areas in investment? How do we get our agenda onto their agenda? How can we interest them? How can we get our interests into their sphere? What can the bioimaging community do to ensure that the value of their field of research is recognized and given the maximum political visibility? So I would like to throw that question open to the panel. I'm going to stop sharing. And if anyone wishes to volunteer to be the first to speak on that, I'd be very happy, or I can, anyone wish to take the lead there? So Antje, please, you have your hand raised.
Yeah, so I take this first question maybe and have the courage. So it was exactly what we had to ask ourselves 10 years ago, or 12 years even, when we started with Eurobiomaging, because there was a nice concept and also the communities were starting to form, but then how to take the next steps. And I think there were two approaches that finally led to the outcome where we are today. One was the one I already presented, that the national communities organized themselves and then started to speak with one community voice to their national funders, which in many cases was happening for the first time. And I think many political funders really valued this community message, because they could be assured that if they invested into the Eurobiomaging participation, there would not be other facilities knocking on their door the next door and complaining, because this was something we were asking for, that this should not happen. That if a community joins, they really have to do this with one voice and really be inclusive in that country. The other point was more a technical one. We wanted to understand which imaging technologies are needed by the scientific community, because what we really did not want to do was build an infrastructure no one wants to access afterwards, where there was no need. So we had a huge survey as a first task. I think it took us more than a year, the whole exercise. And we had almost 700 replies, and the survey was about 100 pages long. It was not trivial for the participants, and it was even less trivial for us to go through the analysis and presentation afterwards. But until today, the answers from the survey are valid, and we got a very good picture of what actually does the scientific community need. And surprisingly, it was not the latest super fancy technology that was just coming from the shelf, so to speak, but it was really more the robust technologies with certain expertise needed that scientists were often looking for. And many funders also, again, were made aware by the national communities about the outcome. And many funding decisions were then based, or I think triggered, by the outcome of the survey. So that was the experience in Eurobiomaging.
Thank you, Antje. So it sounds like that building that consensus from bottom up is very important. I think maybe someone else could confirm this. I think constituencies are important here. I think from a political aspect, policy-making aspect, people are always interested in who you represent, who are you representing, and I think it's therefore very important to build that consensus. It sounds like it's very important to build that consensus. Take a survey, make sure you have 700 replies is a very large amount. It's very different going to somebody and talking to them when representing a small group to a much larger group. I think that's a really good point. Okay, so Vladimir, you have your hand raised, please go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, Chris. So first of all, I'd like to thank the organizers for the invitation and opportunity to speak. Really terrific meeting, wonderful talks, clarifying all the challenges, but most importantly, all the opportunities that the bioimaging brings. So I think we'll agree that the advancing biomedicine depends on a advancement of bioimaging itself. That's how the physicians will be able to see inside the body, to understand what's going on. And when we're talking about how they should go about deciding the priority of the investments, I mean, in our line of work, we communicate with imaging scientists all over the world, and I have to say that imaging scientists in Latin America are one of the best self-organized community. They already established communication, they're exchanging expertise, protocols, networking, etc. So they are intimately familiar. I mean, it's imaging scientists should be the source of identifying the priority. And Antje already laid out everything, like what can be done there based on the experience internationally. On the other side of the question, it's a little bit more difficult. How do you build capacity with the political actors, with politicians? And in that case, I think you raised that topic in the chat where you said that language is very important. We need in this conversation, this dialogue, the benefit language has to be taken into consideration. It is building the momentum. It is informing the public, because eventually it's the public who is going to move the decision. So if all the activities are publicized enough in a way that it's clear to the public and build that momentum or pressure from there, I think that would be one of the ways to do it. Because currently we have seen already several examples where publication in the media already influenced or opened a few doors for some of the imaging scientists. And given how many terrific things are already happening in Latin America, there are platforms are being built which are unique. There are tremendous researchers going on. I mean, it will just make people proud. They want to read something like that right now on the background of all of this non-ending information, meaning nothing. So that is one of the things that I wanted to add to Antje already said.
Thank you, Vladimir. I would, if I could just interject here. So Jan Zuckerberg Foundation took took a really, it seems to me, have taken a decision to support the bioimaging community as a particular focus of their efforts to support the science and on all of the broader policies that they have. Could you explain, or maybe give us an idea why from the Jan Zuckerberg, from your perspective, why bioimaging was from your perspective became a priority?
Yeah, thank you, Chris. So imaging is a part of the broader initiative, which is a science initiative, a Jan Zuckerberg initiative. The goal of the science initiative is to cure, prevent, and manage all diseases by the end of the century. And this may seem as an audacious goal, but over the last 100 years, we have seen tremendous strides in biomedical sciences, which are showing that this is quite achievable. Now, progress in human health can take different forms. And we've already learning how to take better care, how to investigate some diseases, but eventually, fundamentally, it is bioimaging that will bring us to that point. It's an ability of the physicians, as I mentioned, to look inside the body to understand what's going on. So bioimaging we see as an absolutely vital point in achieving this goal. Now, when we're talking about bioimaging, we have 4 different strategies. One is pushing the technology, obviously. Another one is forming the communities. There is analysis, and then all of this in the future has to consolidate into clinical applications. In terms of pushing the frontiers, we had a couple of programs that are aimed at imaging deeper at cellular resolution. On the other side of the spectrum of the resolutions, that's visual proteomics, that's imaging proteins at near atomic resolution in cells. Now, community is the place that brings all of these initiatives together. It is through imaging scientists that all of these technologies appear in the hands of biomedical researchers, because it still requires a lot of expertise. Every new technique requires some knowledge, understanding on how to use that properly and how to get data out of this. And then finally, it's consolidating, pulling all of this expensive equipment together and providing access to that, which is the role of research infrastructures. So without imaging scientists, all of this will pretty much fall apart. But even then, when we're looking at the community, there is a lot of fragmentation. There are technology developers, there are imaging core facility operators, there are software developers. And the goal here is just to reduce the fragmentation as much as possible, to increase the collaboration, to bring all of this together, to foster sharing of the data protocols and expertise. Once this is all done, all of this will just streamline into clinical applications and help to achieve the role.
Excellent. Thank you for that application. And certainly from a personal point of view, having the support come in for, I mean, we're biased. Everybody knows the importance of their own work. Everyone knows the importance of their own area, but these sort of, not really external validations, but the support coming from different areas is always great to see. And we're obviously, the whole community is very grateful for the support that Jan Zuckerberg is showing towards our area. Thank you for your answer. Andrés, you have your hand raised.
Yes, thank you, Chris. Just a little comment to add to the discussion. A lot of important things have been mentioned in the topics that we're discussing now, and I wanted to point out that this very same experience that we're having today, it's a very very important example of how we can build trust between and communicate effectively, like you've mentioned before, between politicians and policymakers and science. And for us, this has been a tremendous lesson. And I mean, this is a very interesting experience. We start with this. We were not used to write projects to a government agency in a like AUSI. We had to learn a lot how to communicate in that language and to put forward a case which was not only based for scientists, you know, like so this effective communication is very, very important. And I think that the example we have here, that people like Claudia being interested in this, it's also part of a back and forward, you know, role that we try to get close to them. They learn how to listen to us. We put things like Vlad was mentioning, like in the same project, we were not only asking for, okay, we want to improve science here, you know, like, but we want to work at different levels. We want to work with people, like community building and at educational level, also scientists want to communicate with private sector industry, which was, you know, Chris, very well, this was part of, is part still of a project. So we need to have this open mind to learn how to communicate to each other. And events like this, I think are very important to build trust among us. Among the other things that Alejandro, I think, did a very, very extremely nice presentation about an example of a community that is building upon all these things.
Thank you, Andrés. Claudia, you have a comment.
Thank you very much. In the same way, I was reading the chat, the opinion that you put in the chat, that for us at least, in this meeting, we have a different policymaker of different countries in Latin America, and at least that I know very well. I think that or policy maker or decision maker. I think that this way could be a very, very good option. All of you know the budget that the public institution not is so much, and the necessity of the science, but of the different areas are very important. Then it's very important that that you say that you trying to put in the feet or the foot, no sé cómo se dice zapato, feet or foot of the other, because sometimes the researchers are talking about something that we can imagine, that in which they are talking. I can understand the importance. All of them say it's very important for the science, for the development. I know all is important. But if you have some group of researchers that talking about the ocean of the sea, and another of the research of cancer, and another of the of research on COVID, how we can prioritize? Because all of these areas are very important, but you have a very little, not little, but it's little, yes, because in Latin American countries, the budget for the science and technology is not too much. In the better case, you have 0.05, 0.04 or 4%. Then we have to work together and put, you say, put some imagine that we can imagine all that you can show us, because in some time we can do something, but if we don't understand what is really the importance with a little examples, is very difficult to do it. I think that we have different instruments, not only in the funding agencies, because for research infrastructure is not possible. The funding agencies don't have a lot of budget that you need. And if each country work alone, it's impossible. It's impossible because the research infrastructure is not expensive because it's not a specific word. Need a lot of resources. Then we have to put together different funding agencies in different countries and select some or put together in the same way to try to work together.
Thank you, Claudia. I have apparently Merja's hand-raising function isn't working, so but she would like to make a comment. Please go ahead, Merja.
Okay, thank you. Sorry, my hand raising is really not working, but I mean this is a good way as well. So I'm for the question that you know really that how we pick these different fields, so that from our perspective, our funding and everything what we do is based on international peer review, as I told you. So basically, what that means that so for instance, our landscape of research infrastructures has developed through the bottom-up process. So the best areas that have been selected through that competition, peer review, competition-based methods. So I mean, in Finland, if I would say the best way of RI to promote oneself is to keep up with the excellence and be visible and active to everybody, but the excellence is the key in our case.
Thank you, Merja. I'm seeing a list of questions arriving from the audience, and I will get round to them. I had a question earlier on for Alejandro, which I think is quite closely related to this topic, and that was so Alejandro, you mentioned in your talk that the trust could be a weak link, and it took a while. At the start, it was difficult to establish, and it caused problems between the different scientific and political communities. What can you elaborate a bit more as to where that trust was perhaps weaker and difficult to establish, and how you eventually managed to improve that situation?
Okay, thank you, Chris. And yeah, this is just in my opinion, that's something that we're still working, and it's not a photograph. So it's something that has been changing. And I think I joined in that sense. I chatted to Claudia, Romano, that we do see a difference in the kind of evolution in how both parties have been able to hear each other. And this comes from the weak trust. I think that's my feeling. This is, of course, open to discussion, comes from both sides, or used to come from both sides. So researchers typically, I wouldn't say despise, but they don't really, Claudia mentioned the word to put in the shoes of the other one. So that's something that from the research community, many times that's not the way we proceed, or we used to proceed, and vice versa. Absolutely. So for decision makers, researchers were typically people that would spend money in weird stuff that you know, it's not making any sense for. So I think that has changed quite a bit, not only because of COVID. COVID has also catalyzed that, but I think Latin America has been showing for many years now that research is producing serious and solid things in many different areas. So indeed, all of you have, so I think that has improved, but we're not there yet, I think. And one thing that I wanted to add, I don't know if I'm answering what you, I think we're in the good sort of pathway. That's my impression. It's being much better. Trust is being built, actually, and in some areas and some things is already there. What I wanted to add is that maybe you know, ESFRI the ESFRI, thinking about all research infrastructure. Of course, I'm an outsider here a little bit. I don't think structural biology and bioimaging are bound to converge, I'm sure. But I think that ESFRI has been so important, and it's been a long story for Europeans. I think we need to have that kind of forum. And there was questions for Claudia in the sense what are the instances? We had a very frustrating experience ourselves previously. Maybe now it would be different. And I talked about it briefly in Mercosur, for instance. But we don't have this kind of regional umbrella. We don't have an instance, a formal, transparent forum where researchers and decision makers and policymakers, the three which are different, would sit together and define these kinds of things using excellence, using also strategy for development, using the different criteria. So that's a drawback that we Latin Americans have to be creative and work for it. It's going to be difficult, but I think it's essential that we have this kind of instance at the Latin American level that would really make everything much more transparent in terms of choosing and moving forward with long-term cycles strategies.
Thank you, Alejandro. These very interesting insights. We have a couple of, we have some questions here. I see Claudia Allen has her hand raised. So please, Claudia, go ahead, and then we can look to some of the other questions in the list we have on there.
Just to come back to the point that Alejandro just made about how the union, the political union, helped in Europe to set up ESFRI. I just want to remind people that ESFRI is not inside the European Union. They are represented of each individual national countries. And that has been helpful, for example, to have a ESFRI, Brexit didn't have consequences in ESFRI because the UK can be involved in the same way Switzerland is involved or Israel are involved. National countries that they are not part of the European Union can be part of ESFRI if they associate in the right way. Then, of course, I'm not going to minimize the fantastic thing that the European Union has been to get European collaboration. But it is possible even without the political union if there is a political will. And I think ESFRI, and I like your acronym, Alejandro, LAXFRI, is a possibility, and you don't need to wait for the political union to happen.
Thank you, Claudia. And so I'm going to turn to some of the list questions we have on the list. Andrés Lopez from Chile asked a question that I think is probably better to put into one of the later. We have other sort of suggestions for discussion in other areas. So I think that's probably we'll put that one down for later discussion. We actually have a couple of questions about strategies to build communities. Particularly Karina Plama from Chile has, to paraphrase her question, I would like to ask about the experience of other groups present, what kind of strategies they use to bring together a diverse and complementary community where all the areas that want to collaborate in such a diverse group can be represented, in particular for young researchers and women in science. This is a very, very important issue globally these days. And I think maybe could I bring in Gaby at this moment, because he talked very, very well about about forming a community really from the beginning and really quite recently. And that's an experience that really we are reproducing now in Latin America. If I'm remembering well, I've made a note here. You made a point about community building through at the start being about identifying who are the key players, looking to the extent of which that there are representation for those technologies and infrastructures within the community. So getting over those sort of initial energy barriers, and if you have, Gaby, Martin, some comment about inclusivity or diversity, was that, how did you ensure the most wide representation of your community from the beginning?
Well, I don't know if it was really an effort to be inclusive in that respect. It's more that we really wanted to have everyone on board. And it just so happened there was a very diverse community of biologists, physicists. Now we even include people on the IT who are more involved in image analysis. We all know each other. We all know who knows what. We communicate. We invite each other for trainings when we do trainings our own institutions. So it does save a lot from having to learn all the skills ourselves. And at the same time, it makes us, each one of us, feel more secure about knowing where to get the expertise when necessary. I mean, having said that, it was also extremely important that as we shared our experience and knowledge and expertise, we sort of started equalizing the levels of these different labs. Because we shared what we know and what we can do, the labs that had less expertise, less knowledge, less equipment now are getting to at the same level as the labs who were older and more advanced, and that was very obvious as well. So I don't know if I exactly answered your question, but
I think yeah, there are kind of related issues. So basically, what we have is an issue of maybe people being reluctant or maybe not feeling like it's difficult at the start of building community for people to actually think that they can belong to that community. Maybe I sometimes receive comments from people that are running open access and I only have one confocal microscope, that, you know, as if that would somehow disqualify somewhere from being part of a community which is about opening up access to bioimaging resources. It's not an issue. It's much more, I personally, I think it's much more of an attitude. If you have that openness, that ability, that reach out, whether you have 50 confocal microscopes or one confocal microscope, I don't think is an issue. But I think there can be a tendency to think that that perhaps, at least at the very, very first stages, how do you forge that sense of community and that sense of belonging? And obviously,
if I can say one thing, what we noticed when we reached out for these people, and as I said, Paula was the first one to do this. She actually reached out to most of us initially. It was quite obvious that everyone was eager to do this. There was no second thoughts for most people, and very few labs dropped out. I actually don't think of a single lab that has dropped out since. They are very eager. Now, having said that, it's also true that not everyone will invest the same amount of time into building activities and fostering the community. And very early on, you're going to have to identify these very well and work very closely with this. You should reach out, try to get everybody in there. And I've seen here people saying that they really want to belong to a community. But also those that take the leadership should realize and be very, very astute at figuring out who is willing to go the extra mile, the extra step into actually putting together activities that everybody benefits from, training activities, writing grants, putting the extra hour for that. So it's a two-level kind of effort that you need in these community buildings. Everybody's eager to do it, but not everybody has the availability to do it.
Thank you, Gaby. So that actually segues really nicely into our second question we've actually naturally come across. So I will just put it onto the screen. So so the second sort of formal question, and Antje, I see you have your hand raised. We'll go straight back to you because the last part is particularly interesting from your perspective. How do we maximize the benefit of building research infrastructure to the widest effect, maximize its potential for improving the quality of scientific research in regions with disparate support for scientific research? And I know that's an issue that has been present in the European Union. It's very prevalent in Latin America. The differences in the investment levels in science between different areas and regions is quite stark. Which is the best balance between having a wide geographic spread of the infrastructure and concentrating it in nodes or centers of excellence? So we mentioned we had a lot of discussion during the talks about nodes, a lot of presentation about nodes. We can open up that issue. And what is the role of international cooperation can play in this? So we're already on that issue. So let's keep going. Antje, you had your hand raised.
Yeah, maybe I make very short comments to all of this. So first would be a reply to what was just discussed and also presented by Gaby. I can strongly echo this, but we also experience ourselves, again, even after years of working on this, when you lead a community or when you are heading such a group, always be aware about your language. because sometimes without knowing, you could sound exclusive when you want to be the opposite. And so I think a lot of self-reflection is also needed at the same time, because at the core, we want to be open for everyone out there. And sometimes you just don't realize when you're not taking along a certain group of people. So that was just one comment to conclude. About the new questions, how to maximize the benefit when you build research infrastructures, or maybe from the existing research infrastructures that are already on the ground. I would say motivating the staff that is working there by making them alert about those community activities, because sometimes you can see astonishing results when they can join a working group that they have not been included with, because they come out of an isolation, again, that we might not be aware of because we are hopping around many of Zoom meetings these days. But there are still people out there that don't, because they just don't know about the opportunities we have been building the last years. And many of these opportunities come for free because they are now virtual, especially because of Zoom meetings like this one, because of new training resources that are really popping up like mushrooms almost. And I think we have to motivate the staff to educate themselves, to be aware about, for example, fair data. What does that mean? How can they help their user to develop fair data? This might not even need that require a new microscope investment. This could just mean the staff knows how to train the user to be ready from day one to prepare for fair data acquisition. I think cross-linking to other disciplines, so Greg was mentioning this before. Again, it doesn't mean a lot of money at the early days, but just to reach out to other disciplines, making them aware about the possibilities of your facility. For example, reaching out to material sciences, linking closer as you're doing in Uruguay with structural biology, linking out to agroecology. We are doing this now as a new adventure in Eurobiomaging, and it's quite fascinating how much we can do with the same facilities for completely different fields. You were asking about the geographic spread of infrastructures. So it took us a decade, as I said, in Eurobiomaging to get the size that we are seeing here today. And it was a long way in the individual countries and then pulling it all together at the European level. So I think if I had known in 2009 what it would come my way, I probably would have left the next day. So my recipe would just take it step by step, go with the existing investment, as I just said, encourage the people who are there, spread enthusiasm in those existing communities and take it from there. Build the trust with the funders, as you just discussed, and then step by step by step, building from the existence infrastructure into the future. And then when it comes to having a call for infrastructure investments, the community should be involved in probably building the criteria, having a say also in the procedure, and make it as transparent as possible and the evaluation as independent as possible, so that everyone has trust in the process, because then you get a sustainable infrastructure. And with this, I stop then and leave.
Thank you, Antje. Very important contribution. Thank you. Going in order, Claudia, you have your hand raised.
Thank you very much. I think that I want to underline the importance that the international cooperation could have in this second question. I want to share and reinforce the idea about the new Horizon Europe program, because in this new program that will be launched in the 24th, the next week, I think, we will have a very huge, very big opportunity to try to build together a new, or not, or reinforce, or have a new project or program that involve different countries that they have different level of development, specifically in if we are talking about infrastructure. I think that this could be a very good opportunity for the different level of development of around Latin America and European countries to work together. The other opportunity that I think that could be very important in relationship with the international cooperation could be the 3 pilot project that will be development initiative that will be development, only for Spain and Portugal, but at least is something with the CITED program. I think that that the international cooperation could be a good partnership partner to try to strengthen the capabilities of the different countries.
Thank you, Claudia. Vladimir.
Yeah, thank you, Chris. I think we already established that it's very important to bring capacity for bioimaging, both expertise and equipment, to regions, to countries, and different parts of the country. And that was the goal for this latest program that we have announced, expanding global access to bioimaging. When we were conducting interviews and exploration of this, several times the idea of the centers of excellence was brought up to us. But at the same time, in many others, we heard back that a lot of biologists in many different parts of the countries in Latin America, they just traditionally didn't have access to this. So they didn't incorporate that in their research. So right now, when we're talking about geography, it looks like we don't have a clear picture of what potentially the geography would be. So I think here the sequence would be to first understand the capacity, to bring it to educate as many people as possible, and then from there to figure out the geography, and that would give a lot of information to think about what should be the distribution. It could be a combination of both, quite frankly. You already have good infrastructure in some places, it's missing in some others, which could be complemented. But we need first to make sure that everyone has access to it, everyone is informed about the opportunities that it will bring, how it will advance their biomedical research. And with time, we'll build up this knowledge, and from there, probably you'll be able to make a decision, informed decision of what should be the spread and what should be the distribution. But eventually, this is critically important because we are talking about research today, and we're talking about domestic public health burden tomorrow. So this could be easily translated to all the government agencies.
Thank you, Vladimir. And just to maybe wrap up that, well, not wrap up, but to add in a personal comment. I mean, for Latin America, bioimaging is very, very important. Diversity, inclusivity has been something that's been extremely important and on our agenda from the beginning. It's not as easy as it sounds. It's not just words. You have to implement it, and that takes a lot of effort. I think it harks back. I think there's an echo here to something that Alejandro mentioned in his talk about helping. He mentioned it in terms of helping new adopters, but they don't have to be new adopters. It can be just the fact that there can be, like say, a geographical isolation or whatever. I think it's very important for any agencies that are looking to become involved in supporting research area in their regions to be very conscious of the need to make sure that there's support at all levels. And also the comment that Alejandro made about asking for help. It's not necessarily about asking for help. It's not about one side asking for help from the other. It needs to be an interchange. It needs to be. So I think there is a cultural tendency, certainly in Mexico. I don't know if that extends to the rest of Latin America. We tend to have a habit of waiting to be asked to do things. And I suggest that we need to be culturally much more proactive, and if we have ideas to propose them, to put them forward, to say, I want to do this, I want to be involved in that, rather than waiting for the invite the whole time. I think that's part of a problem that it's probably universal, but I've certainly noticed it can be a problem around here as well. So it's about being also, you know, helping oneself and saying, look, you know, this is where I want to contribute, and not asking for help, proposing ideas within that, and getting agency for each other. Okay, Jorge Jara, you have your hand raised, so
Sorry, I have a lot of background noise. Maybe Karina has a bit less than me at the moment to make the point.
No?
No?
You sound great.
So, all right, yeah. So that's all right. Okay, I'm just getting closer with the camera. Sorry. Yeah. Well, thank you all for the opportunity, and we are taking notes for sure. I wanted to emphasize a bit on our experience here in Chile, Santiago, with this building of the capacities and bringing together the different people involved, because that involves kind of a cultural change, not only in that goes along the change in resources and equipment and access. It goes as early as to undergrad students, and they work with different programs like such as medicine, biochemistry, or informatics, which is my field, to help to better understand the capabilities of the technology and to be prepared for the challenges now. And there's a lot of inertia in parallel, because like the current structures, especially in Latin American countries or some parts, tends to be very centralized in terms of the expertise and also the capacity. Here in Chile, Santiago and a couple of cities are hotspots, and like I said, the big players tend to hog everything. That's a bit of mea culpa, even for us, because still with people from Santiago and the University of Chile and maybe the Catholic are more regular in the participation. So it's clearly a challenge for us to bring up the other people from the different cities with and universities or centers with different levels of access and experience to get on board and to make more evident what the main issues are, because sometimes we tend to be biased by being in this spot, and this includes for sure the equal access regarding gender or socioeconomic conditions.
Yes, thank you for your comment. This is certainly a problem that's been identified. Well, in Mexico, we have similar problems, and I think it's important in that case then to the structures are in place, because it's about communication. It's about giving people voices, giving people agency, and we need to have structures. We need to have organizations, regional, national organizations that can be more inclusive and open up those lines of communication, such that the inclusivity of is improved. As I say, it's not about how many focal microscopes or how many microscopes the facility has. It's much more about their willingness. And to be fair, if there is a facility with one confocal microscope, I often find that they're far more creative in their solutions that they find to the local problems, and they can actually have much more to share in many aspects. It's always a rich community that always benefits by having the most diverse representation within it. That goes for almost any community I can think of. Thank you for your contribution. Okay, well, we have a couple of comments here in the chat. So Greg, I don't have a surname, sorry, says many of us talk about bio. I assume that means about bioimaging, but in fact, many centers are now multidisciplinary. I think this is a plus when discussing policy with funding officials. Any comments from people who are doing this? So Greg, if you have a microphone, you can open. If you just elaborate a bit, are you making a point that the microscopy has many different areas apart from the biological applications? Or
Chris, he left the meeting.
He left.
Like, yeah.
Okay, well, we'll maybe put that to one side. We have another final question. We have about 10 minutes left, so I did prepare a final question, which I think is a little bit. We haven't talked about this much so far, so this could be interesting in terms of the our ability to. We might have to think on our feet now. So we live in an ever more. Why is my computer so slow today? Okay, so I'm not seeing the question. You might have already done it. Okay, so we live in an ever more virtually connected world, and access to decentralized data resources and other connected and automated technologies is increasing all the time. Much of the current focus for the various bioimaging organizations is on human resources, so it's training, mobility, physical access to facilities. Do the panelists think we will soon need to rethink these approaches and how we should best prepare for this more virtual future. And that actually goes in with another question that came, I'll stop sharing, from the chat function where, so I will bundle this in together. So this is the question from Andrés Lopez, or a point he made. I would like to put on the table the example of CERN. A lot of countries, Latin American countries, at least 5, join the different experiments, paying a fee and joining with a group of scientists. At least in Chile, the collaboration with the Atlas experiment have been quite fruitful. So, so that point is that there's a big centralization. There's and obviously with something like CERN, it's a bit hard to have it any other way, but there's a big centralization of resources. Access is managed from around, the globe, around a number of different cooperating partners. Is bioimaging going to be moving towards that situation in the future? Virtualization of access. At the moment, there's a big emphasis on distributing the access, and microscopy is relatively still presential. So you usually need somebody there to say, I need that cell and that cell and that cell, or maybe prepare the sample before. But I can actually already see, certainly with the pandemic, a lot of imaging facilities have moved to more virtual access, and I think it's been working pretty well. So I'd be interested to hear the panelists or audience views on this matter. And Vlad, you have your hand up, so please take it away.
Yeah, Chris, I think here the key point would be, what's the window of the future that we're talking about? I mean, we talked with you a little bit in the past about future prediction and forecasting and getting ready for that. Yeah, obviously, at some point in the future, full automation probably will kick in, and it will transform the way how we're doing imaging. Maybe it will require less expertise. It's just artificial intelligence, but I'm not sure how far that is away. Right now, if we're looking at the way how microscopes are moving, I see there are a few steps being made by vendors. Like there are some AI implementations in the acquisition process coming from Zeiss. Nikon just recently came out with a microscope that implements some part of AI in acquisition, but they're very careful. It will be very disruptive. So I expect there'll be a lot of resistance to that. So I'm not sure how these transformative changes, how quickly they will appear on the market. So that is in regards to just general approach to microscopy. That will definitely speed things up, but I don't see it coming in the next 5 or 10 years. In regards to centralization, that's a different aspect. It's an organization, and I think that might be a little bit region specific. In some places that might work well, in some places not so much. And also we're talking about biological samples, which would also impose some particular limitations in how you can transport them, whether you can transport them, depending on a safety level. So it will be very, very diverse in general. Industry-wide, that will be difficult to predict. But organizational level, I think centralization it's a nice thing to apply. Again, in particular applications, in regards to exchange of like increased mobility, etc. This is something that we all can benefit from. Exchange of experiences, and global bioimaging is doing already a lot in that aspect. Exchange of experience, the job shadowing. This is an extremely important program that brings new perspective to our jobs in general, like overall for microscopy course and everything else.
Yep, thanks, Vladimir. Yeah, I mean, just from a personal point of view, some of the microscopes that are coming out of some of the real major research Janelia farmers, I mean, they're monstrous, and it scares me. You almost need a building to house them, and multimodal and pretty much looking at, I don't know, 1 million cells in a tissue at the same time, and you just think, okay, this going to be difficult to get more than about many of these microscopes in the world, at least for now, but it's important to open up access. I think mobility will always, that presential aspect is very important, but the mobility is certainly important. And I'm guessing, well, Antje has her hand up, and their global bioimaging has been extremely active in that area. So I'm looking forward to this perspective. You're muted, Antje.
So very briefly about your first comparison with CERN, and if it's maybe something to consider to have a global structure where people could get access to other infrastructures outside of their region. And if you had asked me 2.5 years ago, I would probably have shaken my head and said, no. And also I would not have been really wanted to be involved, knowing how challenging it was to get the European imaging facilities under one umbrella. but seeing what we could actually do when we are really forced to do it the last year. And when it comes to remote access, I have really changed my mind here. And we have collected a lot of experience in different imaging facilities in Europe Imaging to successfully offer remote access, where it doesn't matter if the person is sitting in Prague or sitting in Vienna or sitting in Montevideo, because the technologies are now there to really put this into place, the virtual access. And that, I think the challenge is here mainly for the funders, because it's more a question also of having the staff in place that is capable of underpinning this remote access. Because when we were questioning our facilities, what is the true bottleneck here? It's not so much the internet connectivity or having the next generation of microscope, but it's really the staff who has to have a lot of experience and more time, because a user who's not on site needs more time. And so this is something that we have to consider together with the funders. But we are also saving a lot of money when it comes to travel accommodation and all of that. So yeah, I think from the past year, we can have a global infrastructure at some point, or let's say a network of enabling scientists, no matter what the background, no matter where they're coming from, to have access to the open facilities. And which legal entity that takes place doesn't matter for now.
Thank you, Antje. Yeah. So all of these experiences, I think I mentioned it yesterday in the main meeting. Sounds like there's a white paper or a lot of experiences to get together, and I think we need to find a way to collate them, organize them, and publish them, because I think this will be a big foundation document for, or a good point to actually start and think about how this future could come about more quickly and more efficiently. So thank you for that comment. Maybe as Global Bioimaging could, they're very good at white paper policy documents. This could be one for the agenda. Andrés, you have your hand raised.
Yes, just to add to, I agree with Vlad that it depends a lot on what's the time frame we're looking at here. But I just wanted to add that there is one thing that is very obvious in bioimaging these days, is that we've got two very important parts of the work, and one of them is data processing. After you have the imaging, you have that to analyze those data, and this is very obvious in a lot of applications, new applications now. So in terms of virtual access to that, we have to consider not only the actual microscope, but all the infrastructure that we need to move data and to be able to analyze. And that's very more likely to be able to do remotely, I think. It's way more easy to, and physicists and astronomers, they have this very well established from very long time ago. So this is another part of network importance. Like when you have a network working and establish solid collaborations between that you can access, maybe you don't need to prove as much the capture part, but you can improve the analysis part and data management and data transfer. And that's something that also policy for bioimaging is difficult to make. We've discussed this in global bioimaging, and this is very at different scales. We all have that. We have a very small scale here, and they have this problem. But we saw how big infrastructures like Australia, Canada, North America, Europe, they have this also.
Thanks, Andrés. And it may be a good idea to mention at this point bioimaging archives, which the Bioimage Archive, which is designed to make reanalysis and access to data that's already been collected, reanalysis possible. Vladimir made a comment that petabyte data sets are now existing. So certainly there are terabyte data sets available to the public on the NPR, which is cryo-EM, electron microscopy site. when we still need to improve a lot of the accessibility to be able to manipulate those sorts of to make use of those data sets. I think we're just pretty much coming to the end of the allocated time. Alejandro, you have your hand up, so we're just going to have the final comment from.
No, very quick. Just
very quickly.
It was very. It's a very quick comment about the remote access, which in structural biology is clearly the way that is moving ahead in many ways, not only because of the pandemics, but before that, and really people, it's making much more efficient the use of large central facilities. And there, I just wanted to make one more point, which is actually, it could be felt as a difficulty, but it's an opportunity with the decision makers, with politicians. We couldn't be able to do it alone, is that right now, it's easier to send our samples to Europe than, for instance, from Montevideo to send it to Brazil. And that's not money. On the contrary, it's more expensive, of course, to send it farther away. But we do not have this kinds of logistics for research, like a fast track in terms of customs clearance and logistics, which is just a matter. Not just, it's very difficult, but it could be done. It could be done in a way where we could share samples in some transparent way. Of course, that needs, the agreement of our Latin American countries. So that was just one. Those are the kinds of very concrete examples that we could have in this kind of agenda, where things could be made easier and feasible at some point, and helping actually building the communities here. So it was just that particular point that I wanted to make.
Thank you, Alejandro. I think we'll draw a line under the round table there. Thank you ever so much for the participants. Merja has just announced that she has a tight schedule, so thank you very much, Merja, if you're still there. It was great to have you participating for your presentation. Very much thank you to everybody present. It was a very interactive discussion. I'm very pleased with the way it went. I will hand over for final comments to Federica.
Thank you very much, Chris. I just want to echo your thanks and say it was great to have you all here. I was wondering if we have still the opportunity to take a group picture.